Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, and as we all know, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am Robcasting at you once again from the Robservatory. Coming at you, you imagination connoisseurs, you who make up this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. Welcome, new subscribers. Welcome to the party that we throw every day here on Robservations, the show about something. This is Robservations episode number 456. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle people, however you identify from across the 28 known galaxies, and especially any aliens, are welcome here today. We've been dancing around a subject matter on this show over and over again. And no, I'm not talking about when Tenet's going to be released, because I certainly want to see it. Everyone wants to see it. We all want to see it. I want to see Black Widow. I want to see The Eternals. I want to see No Time to Die. I want to see a lot of movies. But I want to see them in big, giant theaters with huge throngs of people screaming for our favorite heroes and heroines. Whatever it is you want to watch, I want to be there with you. There's not a whole lot of movie news coming along. So, as I am wont to do, I look for other topics to discuss, only topics that I would discuss here on this show. And I'll tell you, one of the things that we keep talking about is human-alien relations. No, I don't mean like alien as in somebody who's coming to your country from another country. I mean real aliens. Would you, the question for all of you, I ask all of my subscribers, look, we have enough problems dealing with all the myriad forms of human lovemaking we have on this planet. But would you, if given an opportunity, would you engage in an interspecies relationship with an alien being? And if you would, how far into the alien realm would you go? Like, are you a girl that finds hentai animation exciting? Would you make it with a demon from the Stygian depths of hell that might have multiple tentacles that could do things that, well, mere mortals couldn't do? Would you do that? I've often said that I would have to draw the line at the alien xenomorph. Like, even if I met a very articulate, very a female, like if I met an alien queen, and she and I got along intellectually, we were on the same as far as universal subjects. If we were friends, perhaps we were drinking buddies or whatever. Could I ever be FBs with an alien queen, an alien xenomorph queen? And no matter how much I liked her, no matter how much I appreciated her intellect and where she was coming from, I just don't think I'm an evolved enough being to where I could engage in, sexual activity with an alien xenomorph. Not that she would be interested, but I'm assuming, like, in this hypothetical scenario, could I ever do that? As much as I might like her, and as much as, I've often said, who knows what she could be doing with those mandibles and her tail at the same time. Things I would probably enjoy, but I just don't think mentally I could go there. Now, from that same movie, we hear one of the crew of the Sulaco say that it doesn't matter whether it's Octurian. Apparently, human beings and Octurians can actually have a good time together. We never got to see them. I don't know what they're like. I don't know what they look like. So I really don't know if that kind of coupling would be something I would be interested in. But I felt, since we joke about it on the show, why not take a good, long, hard look at whether or not human and alien couplings, as they have been imagined or wondered about, could happen. Now, I would be remiss if I did not address an issue that is Star Trek related. And no, I'm not going to talk about Amanda Grayson and Sarek, Spock's father, Spock's parents. There is something that came up the other day that I have to say that I should have known the answer, but I didn't, but it left me curious. And that is this. Do Klingon males have two penises? That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Are they packing Are they packing two handles of heat? I mean, I don't know what you want to call it, but are they? And a cursory Google search led me to an article that answers this sort of question. Now, I understand this was already addressed on Star Trek Discovery. We actually see a Klingon peeing, and there are two streams. Now, that would seem, I mean, they keep trying to tell me that Picard and Discovery are canonical. I don't consider either show canonical. I know. But my Star Trek verisimilitude tells me that somebody ain't doing a very good job convincing me that, oh, well, the last 11 years of Star Trek are canonical. But I'm not going to, this is not about that. But we are going to talk about, to start with, is are Klingons, do they have two? Let's see. Let's see what I came up with. I'll tell you what I came up with. By the way, this entire episode is dedicated to Willow Yang, Vesna, and Paula. Just so you know, the entire episode is. So thank you. I found this article. It was on Inverse Entertainment. Double Klingon penis was Star Trek canon before Discovery. And this was written by Ryan Britt in 2018. That's right, 2018. It was actually February 20th, 2018. In the season finale of Star Trek Discovery, one Klingon just couldn't hold it. In the Orion colony on Kronos, a Klingon was briefly glimpsed peeing on a wall. But why did that dude have two streams instead of one? Writers on Discovery have confirmed that this idea was not all that new. If you're upset about this, blame Worf. Klingons have double organs, was established in Next Generation. On February 14th, 2018, two of Discovery's writers, Bo-Yeon Kim and Erica Lippold, were interviewed on the Alpha Quadrant webcast, where they confirmed what some fans saw. Yes, that Klingon has two penises, or peni, but this isn't an example of Discovery changing canon per se. In the 1992 Next Generation episode Ethics, Worf had to undergo serious surgery, and it was established that Klingons have backup organs for pretty much everything. This means the idea that they have two livers, four lungs, and two of the other things was already canon way before Discovery got going. Now, I would say this. This wasn't necessarily directly established. Because I would say, you know, as far as organs go, sure. We're talking about reproductive organs. But Klingons don't have 4 arms and 4 legs, even though those aren't organs per se. So I would say that it wasn't actually addressed, so Discovery came in and made their own. Another decision that Discovery made, you know, I don't think I agree with that, but okay. So the Discovery writers got cheeky, and they gave us 2 penises. According to canons, Klingons have 2 organs. They have 2 sets of everything, right? Bo-Yeon Kim said. So we had this debate. When we say 2 of everything, does that include the penis? And so, with the encouragement of producer Akiva Goldsman, of course it was with his encouragement, the scene of a Klingon peeing on a wall was written into the Discovery finale. Because really, that's what they should be concentrating on. Because gosh knows, isn't that what makes good Star Trek? Historically, Star Trek had a long history with alien genitals. In Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, Kirk wins a fight in a Klingon prison by kicking an alien what he thinks are the alien's knees. Shapeshifter Martia tells Kirk those were not his knees. Not everybody keeps their genitals in the same place. Always Star Trek Discovery. So there you go. According to that, you know, I wanted to be sure. I wanted to answer this question first before we get into something else. So there you go. Klingons apparently have 2 penises. How that works, I mean, it depends. Now I want to know, are they side by side or are they one on top of the other? See, I just think that the way that the humanoid physique is constructed, I don't think that necessarily 2 appendages would be, it doesn't seem like from a design standpoint that would really work out. I don't know, unless one is for one thing and the other is for another. So, you know, all of you people, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, what is a Klingon DP like? I don't know. I mean, I can't tell you. I really can't get into it now. I don't really understand. I've already probably been demonetized, but I figured let's have some fun. Let's have some fun. Now, one of the things that I wanted to get into with this subject, because I would like to think that we are not alone in the universe, and if you believe that the preservers seeded the Milky Way galaxy with humanoid life, as they did in the Star Trek universe, that's why so many people look humanoid in the Star Trek futures, because they were seeded here by an advanced race, the preservers. We first had a glimpse of them in the Paradise Syndrome from the 3rd season with the asteroid deflector, and then the 6th season Next Generation episode, The Chase, gets into this in a big way. And Shatner's books, as I can't seem to ever put these glasses on where they're not smudged. Shatner's books that he wrote with the Reeve Stevens, Preserver, is a great book. And if you read the trilogy with Ashes of Eden, The Return, and Preserver, it's a fine Star Trek trilogy I recommend that everyone read. The Reeve Stevens and Shatner did a phenomenal job. So, I wanted to look into this. I've read, obviously, novels. There's been science fiction novels that have dealt with alien-human relations. Great books like Ursula K. Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness deals with multiple gendered species, more than just two. And anybody who's interested in reading a great science fiction book and is interested in gender or any kind of LGBTQ or trans rights, you should delve into Ursula K. Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness. But also, I was looking into other things to read, and believe it or not, the Los Angeles Review of Books had a great article. And apparently they have a whole series. I delved into this first article. But part 1 of Imagining Alien Sex, From Ming the Merciless to The Lovers. This is by David Lum and Jonathan Alexander. It was published on December 30th, 2013. And I was like, I know this is a long one, but worth reading. So here we go. And come on, everybody. I expect everyone to be mature now. In 2013's hotly anticipated science fiction cinema romps, aliens are met with justified hyperviolence. Guillermo del Toro's Pacific Rim is a rock'em sock'em that ends with nuclear KO to the invading aliens, while the adaptation of Orson Scott Card's Ender's Game finishes its xenophobic war drum buildup with, again, a justified nuclear holocaust. Human interaction with the aliens is remote. Cockpits and scales separate the protagonists from the alien enemies, which in turn separates the audience from aliens they might otherwise identify with. After decades of human losses, both films' climactic fizzle vengeance leaves us cathartically satisfied after the aliens are annihilated out of humanity's path. Such intentional separation is essential to selling the xenophobic us versus them binarism to the audience. A broad simplification compared to the alien intimacy, I know what you're thinking, in 2012's highly anticipated sci-fi blockbuster Ridley Scott's Prometheus. Instead of insectile swarms and neon-blooded extra-dimensional nightmares, the creatures of Prometheus simulate and sometimes graphically assimilate the humans they encounter. Instead of platonic combat, the extraterrestrial creatures intimately entwine themselves with humans, which is intended to disturb. Getting bludgeoned by the alien isn't repulsive, but getting touched is. The success of Prometheus rests not just on the film's amazing special effects and taut, thriller-like narrative, but on the questions it raises about the origins of our species. Questions central to the film's narrative, but also central to human self-questioning. Who are we, really? Why are we here? Were we created, and if so, for what purpose? Prometheus tantalizes us, like many other sci-fi films and stories, with hints of our alien origins. But in those hints lies a bit of squeamishness, deliciously played out on the big screen as the characters come face-to-face with alien life forms, bodies interpenetrated by them, orifices broached and breached in the most intimate ways. While images of DNA strands combining and recombining make our potential alien origins look like a high-stakes lab experiment, the underlying sensation of such images is strangely sexual. After all, petri dishes aside, reproduction generally occurs through sexual encounter, and nearly all of our individual origins as people began with our biological parents' sweaty sex. And the filmmakers know this, bringing the alien into close proximity with the human to call on our close associations of origin and sex. Who can forget the earlier Alien films in which the icky alien nearly licks Sigourney Weaver in a scene both frightening and provocative? While Prometheus doesn't offer us images of human-alien sex, the film certainly plays with sexual undertones, which might strike some as strange, as sci-fi seems a very unsexual genre. When we asked sci-fi author Greg Benford about sex in sci-fi, he quipped sarcastically, "There's sex in sci-fi?" But there is, and quite a bit, and often more explicitly represented than in Prometheus. A good bit of imaginative writing and filmmaking has gone into attempts to represent close encounters of a sexual kind. And we're not talking about fringe pulp stories. Significant episodes of the very Star Trek series offer us glimpses into intimate relations among aliens, sometimes between humans and aliens, and sometimes amongst different alien species, such as the relationship between the Klingon Worf and the Trill Jadzia Dax in Deep Space Nine. They misspelled Worf in this article. One blog even purports to list the all-time greatest human-alien sex scenes. In written science fiction, major authors such as Ursula K. Le Guin and Octavia Butler, women authors, by the way, Vesna, Willow, have written masterpieces in which deep, emotional, intimate, and sexual relations between humans and aliens form the central narrative. Why? Why is imagining such encounters a significant portion of our interest in science fiction, our imagining of the future, or of an alternative present? The human capacity for erotic fantasy is rich and varied. Our erotic imaginations reach far and wide in pursuit of pleasure. With increased interest in spacefaring, as well as increased interest in the availability of science fiction, the imagination thrills, at least for some, to new sexual possibilities. Conversely, sexual encounters with aliens could also be understood as complex projections about our own alienation from ourselves. As we become more technologized, as we intervene more directly in our species' evolution and the evolution of our planet, we may feel estranged from our own humanity. Imagining alien sex may be one way to grapple with those feelings of estrangement, at least metaphorically. Writers of science fiction have grappled not only with how to represent human-alien sex, but also why such representations need exist at all. Sci-fi author Benford, winner of the Nebula Award and author of Timescape, muses on such questions in his essay, Effing the Ineffable. And he suggests that rendering the alien, making the reader experience it, is the crucial contribution of science fiction. Science fiction is all about our encounter with difference. What better way to heighten the encounter with difference than through a sex scene involving humans and aliens? A bit more seriously, as we shall see, in a column later in this series, several writers of feminist science fiction have argued that the depiction of aliens and alien sexuality may offer us productive alternatives in reimagining the rigid sex and gender roles that often constrain expression and identity in many Earth cultures. Imagining sex with aliens performs an important, if admittedly odd, cultural and even political work. In imagining sexual activity with aliens, or even just imagining sexual aliens, we are projecting some of our own assumptions, values, and beliefs about sex and sexuality into those representations. Such stories and narratives may metaphorically reflect existing tensions and issues, giving us a chance to reflect more critically on our own present-day earthbound cross-cultural sexual politics. Anthologies of SF depicting human-alien sexual relations have sprung up over the last few decades, including Gardner, I've never known how to pronounce Gardner's last name, Dessois, Gardner Dessois' Killing Me Softly, Erotic Tales of Unearthly Love, and Ellen Datlow's collections Off Limits and Alien Sex. By the way, both of those editors always put out a good book, so I would listen. Killing Me Softly, Erotic Tales of Unearthly Love, and Ellen Datlow's collections Off Limits and Alien Sex, I can assure you all three would be worth reading. In the introduction to Off Limits, Datlow opines, how can we know what aliens want when we can't even agree on what humans want from each other in a relationship? We often seem alien to one another. So figuring us as alien might be a way to emphasize differences and explore how to overcome our fear of difference. Moreover, in Aliens and Alien Societies, a writer's guide to creating extraterrestrial life forms, Stanley Schmidt advises would-be writers of science fiction that writing about aliens can serve many useful purposes, such as inviting reflection on subjects that might be too difficult to discuss directly with reference to real-world situations and issues. In more modern, complex, and sophisticated stories, such an approach might be useful if a writer wishes to get his readers to think about a theme so controversial in his own society that setting a story there would either get it banned or generate too much emotion to allow rational thought. Such subjects could include ongoing biases against interspecies sex as code for interracial relationships. After all, Miscegenation laws have only recently been struck down. Sex and the mixing of cultures, investigating cross-cultural relations in mixed and blended families, can be tricky and touchy. And also, the worldwide sex trade, even today, some cultures' economies depend in some part on sexually servicing other cultures, as in the relationship between the U.S. and Thailand. Such representation help us think about how we encounter others, even earthbound others, with radically different values. Moreover, such imagining, as the feminist sci-fi writers advise, can allow us a way to rethink and reconceive the future of sex and how we want to organize and monitor appropriate and ethical sexual behavior. The encounter of alien sex is frequently about the necessity of negotiating possibilities for reproduction, pleasure, and connection with the other. In this four-part series, we look at different depictions of sci-fi and sex between humans and aliens, beginning with some early encounters in pulp and classic science fiction in which the exotic other entices sometimes pleasurably, sometimes perilously. Then we move to feminist and new wave interventions in imagining intimate engagements with aliens, particularly as feminist sci-fi authors often understood alien sex as a metaphor for misunderstandings between the sexes or how we are alien to one another here on Earth. We then boldly go with Star Trek and other popular mass media sci-fi shows to see how alien sex gets taken up in pop sci-fi. And we conclude the series with a look at Octavia Butler's Xenogenesis trilogy, perhaps the most complex and nuanced examination of human-alien intimate interaction. Once again, I would like to point out that Octavia Butler, she passed away, but she is a black female feminist sci-fi writer, and let me tell you, her Xenogenesis trilogy is definitely worth your time. Early science fiction, particularly the pulp stories of the 30s and 40s, often depicted damsels in distress, fleeing alien invaders and advances of alien warlords. Early Flash Gordon comic strips from the 30s and televised episodes in the 50s frequently showed us Dale Arden, Flash's female sidekick, threatened by the implicitly sexual advances of Ming the Merciless of Mongo. Prepare her for our pleasure. Can't wait to get that 4K disc. These alien encounters reflected the gender, sexual, and often racial biases of their times. Women were helpless in the face of alien, read foreign, terrors, and men needed to learn to protect them. Curiously, the foreign terror seemed frequently Asian or blatantly non-white, perhaps marking the American dominant cultural concern both with foreign invasion and the less threatening immigration of individuals from Asia and non-European countries. Science fiction frequently codes such concerns, thinly veiling the antagonists as representative of the current political or cultural threat. Note, for instance, how the representation of Klingons in the various Star Trek series steadily changed from vaguely Asian, a leftover from the days of Ming the Merciless, to black, with almost all Klingons portrayed by African-American actors. The change suggests shifting racial concerns in America from the 60s through the 90s. After World War II and the quelling of the Asian threat from Japan, attention steadily turned to uneasy race relations within America. Indeed, as the series progresses, the Federation and the Klingon Empire negotiate a series of uneasy truces, tracking, as it were, stalemates, tensions, and periodic reconciliations in Afro-Anglo relations in the U.S. In terms of sexual representation in the early and mid-century sci-fi, we must remember its readership was largely composed of young men, including a significant number of adolescents. Gendered representations were fairly stereotypical. Sexual representation were also implicit or coded. In science fiction, history, science, and vision, Robert Scholes and Eric Rabkin suggest that, although the Oedipus myth permeates science fiction, and although that myth uses sexual symbols, graphic depiction of sex is rare in science fiction, though at one remove from the literal, such as items as ray guns and spaceships may well function as phallic symbols. Ray guns and elongated spacecraft may indeed have served as phallic signifiers for young men's fantasies of bravery, might, and conquest, sublimating overt sexual content into symbolic trappings, but some authors increasingly wanted to explore more adult terrain. Theodore Sturgeon was amongst the first to take 1950s readers of American sci-fi into sexual territories such as genetic engineering, future androgyny, and even homosexuality. Philip Jose Farmer may have given sci-fi readers the first glimpse of alien sex. Scholes and Rabkin discuss his 1952 novel The Lovers as among the first to explore interspecies sexual relationships in a positive light. not as the threatening and territorial challenges of Ming the Merciless. In The Lovers, as Scholl and Rabkin put it, the extraterrestrial wife turns out to be a kind of insect who literally dies in childbirth for love of her human husband, and he, in turn, decides not to return to Earth, but to raise his children, who are best described as maggots. With great skill, Farmer makes this potentially repulsive story into a moving study of the development of love. The short novel moves quickly but poignantly in depicting this intimate affair, and Farmer proceeds in a series of other short works to explore human-alien sexual liaisons. Scholes and Rabkin note, however, that such depictions were limited at the time. More common than such bizarre relationships, however, are sexual liaisons between humans from widely different worlds or cultures, usually introduced as a dramatization of psychological relationships, as in the efforts of Rydra Wong to help Butcher develop a sense of self in Delaney's Babel 17. Samuel R. Delany also is a black and homosexual writer, science fiction writer, that I was particularly enamored of. He wrote a book called Dahlgren that I said on the show blew my mind. Now, I didn't know that he was black or gay when I read the book. It didn't really matter to me, but he's always dealt with these issues in his work. And if you want to read some mind-blowing sci-fi, try and read Dahlgren and report back to me. Delaney's Babylon 17. They cite, for instance, experimental sci-fi author Harlan Ellison's A Boy and His Dog, made into a popular underground film about a young man in a post-apocalyptic world trapped by a group of humans who live exclusively underground. He is forced to provide them semen since their men have become infertile. Such relatively limited exploration of sex in sci-fi, particularly alien sex, is characteristic of much early and mid-century Anglo-American sci-fi. Scholes and Rabkin note accurately that if science fiction has been a bit belated in according to sexual relations their due, the form has been a bit advanced in its treatment of race and race relations. Indeed, the encounter with the alien was most often used as an opportunity to explore concerns about cultural and political invasion, as well as xenophobia. Who are these different-looking others with whom we must now negotiate and compromise? By the 60s and 70s, things were starting to change. The emergence of a widespread feminist movement began to complement in strength and power the civil rights movement fighting for racial equality, and the combined social and sexual experimentation of young people throughout this era prompted new explorations in fantastic literature, particularly as writers began using the tropes and narratives of sci-fi to explore alternative, sometimes radical social arrangements. For instance, Ernst Kallenbach's Ectopia serves as an imaginative space for thinking about the social, ecological, political, and sexual progressiveness of the period. Major sci-fi writers such as Ellison, John Brunner, J.G. Ballard, and others began using more experimental stylistic techniques to depict their radical social visions, and this generation of sci-fi writers came to be known as the New Wave, suggesting an evolution, even maturation, of this particular kind of genre fiction. Now, if you want to read the rest of this series, I am going to put a link to this right in here. Now, of course, this was a very serious take on our discussions. Not exactly, I'm not going to get all bum chicka bow bow with a xenomorphic alien because, frankly, it would scare me. I mean, you never know. I would just be too terrified to go anywhere with a xenomorph, and I don't think there'd be hygienical concerns I probably couldn't get past. You don't know. But anyway, now there's something that we've talked about a lot on this show, and we've referred to it. People have talked about it a lot. But it is probably one of my favorite examples of anyone dealing directly with what could a human-alien relationship look like. What would that be like? How would it work? Well, ladies and gentlemen, kind souls, gentle beings from across the 28 known galaxies, I'm here to bring you perhaps the most famous essay ever written about this very subject. And it does come from Larry Niven, and it's called Man of Steel, Woman of Kleenex. He's faster than a speeding bullet. He's more powerful than a locomotive. He's able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. Why can't he get a girl? At the ripe old age of 31, Superman first appeared in Action Comics June 1938, Kal-El, alias Superman, alias Clark Kent, is still unmarried. Almost certainly, he is a virgin. This is a serious matter. The species itself is in danger. An unwed Superman is a mobile Superman. Thus, it has been alleged to those who chronicle the Man of Steel's adventures are responsible for his condition, but the cartoonists are not to blame. Nor is Superman handicapped by psychological problems. Granted, that poor oaf is not entirely sane. How could he be? He's an orphan, a refugee, and an alien. His homeland no longer exists in any form, save for gigatons upon gigatons of dangerous, prettily colored rocks. As a child and young adult, Kal-El must have been hard to find an adequate father figure. What human could control his antisocial behavior? What human would dare try and punish him? His actual highly social behavior during this period indicates an inhuman self-restraint. What wonder if Superman drifted gradually into schizophrenia? Torn between his human and Kryptonian identities, he chose to be both, keeping his split personalities rigidly separate. A psychotic desperation is evident in his defense of his secret identity. But Superman's sex problems are strictly physiological and quite real. The purpose of this article is to point out some medical drawbacks to being a Kryptonian amongst human beings and to suggest possible solutions. The Kryptonian humanoid must not be allowed to go the way of the petrodactyl and the passenger pigeon. What turns on a Kryptonian? Superman is an alien, an extraterrestrial. His humanoid frame is doubtless the result of parallel evolution, as the marsupials of Australia resemble their mammalian counterparts. A specific niche in the ecology calls for a certain shape, a certain size, certain capabilities, certain eating habits. Be not deceived by appearances. Superman is no relative to Homo sapiens. What arouses Kal-El's mating urge? Did Kryptonian women carry some subtle mating cue at the appropriate times of year? Whatever it is, Lois Lane probably didn't have it. We may speculate that she smells wrong, less like a Kryptonian woman than like a terrestrial monkey. A mating between Superman and Lois Lane would feel like sodomy, and would be, of course, by church and common law. Assume a mating between Superman and a human woman designated LL for convenience. Either Superman has gone completely schizo and believes himself to be Clark Kent, or he knows what he's doing, but no longer gives a damn. 31 years is a long time. For Superman, it has been even longer. He has X-ray vision. He knows what he's missing. One should not think of Superman as a peeping Tom. A biological ability must be used. As a child, Superman may have never known that things had surfaces until he learned to suppress his X-ray vision. If millions of people tend shamelessly to wear clothing with no lead in the weave, that's not Superman's fault. The problem is this. Electroencephalograms taken of men and women during sexual intercourse show that orgasm resembles a kind of pleasurable epileptic attack. One loses control over one's muscles. Superman has been known to leave his fingerprints in steel and hardened concrete accidentally. What would he do to the woman in his arms during what amounts to an epileptic fit? Consider the driving urge between a man and a woman, the monomaniacal urge to achieve greater and greater penetration. Remember also that we're dealing with Kryptonian muscles. Superman would literally crush LL's body in his arm, while simultaneously ripping her open from crotch to sternum, gutting her like a trout. Lastly, he'd blow off the top of her head. Ejaculation of semen is entirely involuntary in a human male, and in all other forms of terrestrial life. It would be unreasonable to assume otherwise for a Kryptonian. But with Kryptonian muscles behind it, Kal-El's semen would emerge with the muzzle velocity of a machine gun bullet. One can imagine that the Kent home in Smallville was riddled with holes during Superboy's puberty, and why did Lana Lang never notice that? In view of the foregoing, normal sex is impossible between Lois Lane and Superman. Artificial insemination may give better results. First, we must collect the semen. The globules will emerge at transonic speeds. Superman must first ejaculate, then fly frantically after the stuff to catch it in a test tube. We assume that he's on the moon, both for privacy and to prevent the semen from exploding into vapor on hitting the air at such high speeds. He catches the semen, of course, before it evaporates in a vacuum. He's faster than a speeding bullet. But can he keep it? All known forms of Kryptonian life have superpowers. The same must hold true to living Kryptonian sperm. We may reasonably assume that Kryptonian sperm are vulnerable only to starvation and to green kryptonite, that they can travel with equal ease through water, air, vacuum, glass, brick, boiling steel, solid steel, liquid helium, or the core of a star, and that they are capable of translight velocities. What kind of test tube will hold such beasties? Kryptonian sperm and their usual powers will give us further trouble. For the moment, we will assume, because we must, that they tend to stay in the seminal fluid, which tends to stay in a simple glass tube. Thus, Superman and Lois Lane can perform artificial insemination. At least there will be another generation of Kryptonians. Or will there? A ripened but unfertilized egg leaves Lois Lane's ovary because begins its voyage down her fallopian tube. Sometime later, tens of millions of sperm released from the test tube begin their own voyage up Lois Lane's fallopian tube. The magic moment approaches. Can a human breed with a Kryptonian? Do we ever even use the same genetic code? On the face of it, Lois Lane could more easily breed with an ear of corn than with Kal-El, but coincidence does happen, and if the genes match, one sperm arrives before the others. It penetrates the egg, forms a lump on its surface. The cell wall now thickens to prevent other sperm from entering. Within the now fertilized egg, changes take place, and 10 million Kryptonian sperm arrive slightly late. Were they human sperm, they would be out of luck. But these tiny, blind things are more powerful than a locomotive. A thickened cell wall won't stop them. They will all enter the egg, obliterating it in nearly an orgy of microscopic gang rape. So much for artificial insemination. But Lois Lane's problems are just beginning. Within her body, there are still tens of millions of frustrated Kryptonian sperm. The single egg is now too diffuse to be a target. The sperm scatter. They scatter without regard to what is in their path. They leave curved channels, microscopically small. Presently, all will have found their way to the open air. That leaves Lois Lane with several million microscopic perforations, all leading deep into her abdomen. Most of the channels will intersect one or more loops of intestine. Peritonitis is inevitable. Lois Lane becomes desperately ill. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of sperm swarm the air over Metropolis. This is more serious than it looks. Consider, these sperm are virtually indestructible. Within days or weeks, they will die for lack of nourishment. Meanwhile, they cannot be affected by heat, cold, vacuum, toxins, or anything short of green kryptonite. And other forms of kryptonite. For instance, there are chunks of red kryptonite that make giants of Kryptonians. Imagine 10 million earthworm-sized spermazoa swarming over Metropolis's beaches, driving to fertilize the beach balls, but I digress. There they are, minuscule but dangerous, for each has supernormal powers. Metropolis is shaken by tiny sonic booms. Wormholes, charred by meteoric heat, sprout magically in all kinds of things. Plate glass, masonry, antique ceramics, electric mixers, wood, household pets, and citizens. Some of the sperm will crack light speed. The Metropolis night comes alive with a network of narrow, eerie blue lines of Cherenkov radiation. And women whom Superman has never met find themselves in a delicate condition. Consider, Lois Lane won't get pregnant because there are too many of the blind, mindless beasts. But whenever one sperm approaches an unfertilized human egg in its panic flight, it will attack. How close is close enough? A few centimeters? Are sperm attracted to chemical cues? It seems likely. Metropolis had a population of millions, and Kryptonian sperm could travel a long and crooked path, billions of miles, before it gives up and dies. Several thousand blessed events seem not unlikely. If the pubescent Superboy plays with himself, we have the same problem over Smallville. Several thousand lawsuits would follow. Not that Superman can afford to pay. There's a trick when you squeeze a lump of coal into its allotropic diamond form. The above analysis gives us part of the answer. In our experiment in artificial insemination, we must use a single sperm. This presents no difficulty. Superman may use his microscopic vision and a pair of tiny tweezers to pluck a sperm from the swarm. In its eagerness, the single sperm may crash through Lois Lane's abdomen at transonic speeds, wreaking havoc. Is there any way to slow it down? There is. We can expose it to gold kryptonite. Gold kryptonite, we remember, robs a Kryptonian of all of his supernormal powers permanently. Were we to expose Superman himself to gold kryptonite, we would solve all of his sex problems, but he would be Clark Kent forever. We may regard this solution as somewhat drastic, but we can expose the test tube of seminal fluid to gold kryptonite and then use standard techniques for artificial insemination. By any of these methods, we can get Lois Lane pregnant without killing her, but are we out of the woods yet? Though exposed to gold kryptonite, the sperm still carries Kryptonian genes. If these are recessive, then Lois Lane carries a developing human fetus. There will be no more Supermen, but at least we need not worry about the mother's health. If some or all of the Kryptonian genes are dominant, can the infant use his X-ray vision before birth? After all, with such power, he can probably see through his own closed eyelids. This would leave Lois Lane sterile. If the kid starts using heat vision, things get even worse. But when he starts to kick, it's all over. He'll kick his way out into the open air, killing himself and his mother. Is there a solution? There are several. Each has its drawbacks. We can make Lois Lane wear a kryptonite. For our purposes, all forms of kryptonite are available in unlimited quantities. It has been estimated from the startling tonnage of kryptonite fallen to Earth since the explosion of Krypton that the planet must have outweighed our entire solar system. Doubtless, the planet Krypton was a cooling black dwarf star, one of a binary pair, the other member being a red giant. But too little kryptonite may allow the child to damage her, while too much may damage or kill the child. Intermediate amounts may do both, and there's no safe way to experiment. A better solution is to find a host mother. We have not yet considered the existence of a Supergirl. She can't mate with Superman because she's his first cousin, and only a cad would suggest differently. She could carry the child without harm, but Supergirl has a secret identity, and her secret identity is no more married than Supergirl herself. If she turned up pregnant, she would probably be thrown out of school. A better solution may be to implant the growing fetus in Superman himself. There are places in a man's abdomen where a fetus could draw adequate nourishment, growing as a parasite, and where it would not cause undue harm to surrounding organs. Presumably, Clark Kent can take a leave of absence more easily than Supergirl's schoolgirl alter ego. When the time comes, the child would be removed by cesarean section. It would have to be removed early, but there would be no problem with incubators as long as it was fed. I leave the problem of cutting through Superman's invulnerable skin as an exercise for the alert reader. The mind boggles as the image of a pregnant Superman cruising the skies of Metropolis. Batman would refuse to be seen with him. Strange new jokes would circulate the prisons, and the race of Krypton would be safe at last. That was written by Larry Niven in 1971, and it was in his book, All the Myriad Ways. So there you go. There is, we are delving into the idea of humans coupling with aliens. What shape could it take? Amazing. I mean, we have an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, Sub Rosa, where Beverly Crusher gets it on with the Ghost. I mean, you know, we got Trill, joined species. Trills have been humanoids. They've had male and female hosts, and the Trills don't seem really concerned with anyone's gender. They realize that you could love multiple people across time and space, and gender isn't really that important. Only love is. Marion Blaylock in The Hunger, she might be an immortal vampire, but she's taken both male and female lovers. But she's a vampire, so that's still interspecies. I mean, she was, of course, once human. But still, I mean, who doesn't fantasize about getting it on with a vampire once in their life? I mean, I know I have. And once Catherine Deneuve was playing Marion Blaylock, I'm like, come on, man. And if you loved Hammer horror movies, I mean, there was some very, very beautiful naked vampires in those films. So let me tell you. I don't know why it's easier to imagine myself making it with a female vampire than it is with, say, a female alien. But here we are. Anyway, I just thought after this subject keeps coming up in letters and people keep talking about it, why not take a more serious approach to it? What do you guys think? Are you laughing or are you taking this very seriously? Which you should, damn it. This is a very serious subject. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that because it was interesting. And who do we have as far as letters? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Ian Samuels is here yet again. Rob and fellow Robservationists. Continuing on the subject of War of the Worlds, for those of you who watched Whining About Movies yesterday, yes, my beautiful War of the Worlds Blu-ray that I got from Australia, and also if you don't want to wait and get it from Australia, you can get the Criterion version that comes out next week. Continuing on the subject of War of the Worlds, the alien machines were indeed biomechanical. In the book, bodies were being mulched and used to spray the ground to create the red weed, something missing from the 53 movie. In fact, in the book, it is bacteria from that blood that infects them. Also missing, making Parson Matthew Sylvia's uncle means we lose the plot of the Parson Nathaniel and his wife Beth. Okay, in the 2005 Spielberg Cruise adaptation, the biggest insult to the original source material ever, the concept of the war machines being buried underground was a plot taken from the Resurrection series. They had a plot where there was ancient machines buried on an Indian reservation, but the idea of the aliens being transported through lightning and the fact that a huge plot point in the film is that lightning never strikes the same place twice. If that was a plot in 53, that might be forgivable, but in 25, definitely not. Then, of course, you get the more typical happy endings studios often insist American movies have. The flying wing that is in the 53 movie, interesting fact, the flying wing is a concept in H.G. Wells' Things to Come novel. Yes, it is. The hysteria that was supposed to have happened during the Orson Welles radio broadcast was just an invention of the newspapers. In fact, Welles was disappointed by the fact not many people bothered tuning in. That's it for now, Ian. Well, Ian, thank you for that, and thanks for that first letter you wrote to Elizaviews, to Whining About Movies last night. Very much appreciate that, sir. Thank you very much. Let's see what else we have. And from whom? Dave Atkin writes in. Hi, Rob. I was just thinking about all this cancel culture that is going on these days, with the white voice actors who voice Apu and The Simpsons and the Cleveland family, and Cleveland in the Family Guy, quitting the roles to give the roles to black actors and so on. I was thinking about the films I grew up with, watching, like Ben-Hur, The Ten Commandments, and even Short Circuit. If cancel culture was a thing back then, would Charlton Heston be canceled for playing Moses? And Ben-Hur? And Fisher Stevens for playing an Indian man in brownface? Even watching the 2012 film Exodus, Gods and Kings, where Joel Edgerton and Christian Bale play Moses and Ramses in Egyptian face, plus other white actors, being pretty unfamiliar with Joel and Fisher, I didn't find out till late that it was him playing an Egyptian character till years later, as I was a kid watching Short Circuit, and that the sweet Indian guy was actually a white actor named Fisher Stevens. Doesn't get more white than that. That's why I never saw him in anything else since. Watching these films, I have never thought, oh, that's a racist character, or oh, he's playing it to be racist. They're just actors acting, playing good roles. Should an Indian actor have played the character on Short Circuit and an actor of Egyptian descent play Ramos? Probably, but like you said the other day, it's all about star power. Thanks for reading, Dave. Yeah, we talk about that a lot on this show, and my whole feeling is this. If you have a character who's Indian, now East Indian, from India, there's so many great Indian actors in the world. You just hire an Indian actor. As the viceroy of verisimilitude, I would not be hiring an actor that's supposed to be Indian that wasn't of Indian descent. It wouldn't make sense to me. I'd be like, why would you do that? You want to create verisimilitude. You want to create reality. So, but the one thing is, with those actors, again, the idea that let's call it blackface, but what you're doing, it was, blackface has a long tradition of being very disrespectful and making fun of black people. That's why it's bad. And a lot of the time, Alec Guinness, he's played other ethnicities. And the reason why he did is because it's Alec Guinness. He was one of the best actors in the world. That's why you hire him. Nowadays, there's a lot more diversity in terms of the talent pool that you can draw from. So I don't think that would happen anymore. But you're right. It's very interesting. Would those movies be canceled? Is somebody going to go after Ben-Hur? I would say no, because casting Charlton Heston himself in that role is part of our historical record. And then you realize that, at the time they had to make a certain decision. They needed somebody to be in that movie, one of the most biggest, expensive movies ever made at the time. So they have to have a movie star. They didn't have a choice. Omar94 is here. Omar94 says, Rob, this might seem like a strange thing to ask, but I'm curious to know what studio you think of when the word movie comes up. Ooh, I like this question. Like, if someone said movie in a sentence without mentioning a studio, I'm curious to know what studio you think of. For me, I don't know why, but I always think of Warner Brothers. I'm not sure what it is exactly, but there's something about Warner Brothers that always comes into my head when the word movie is brought up. There seems to be some sort of vibe that makes me think of that studio in particular. I'm not particularly sure why that is. I'm not sure if you and others have the same thing going on. It might just be me. Thanks. Live long and prosper. Well, Omar, once again, I love saying this, but you, sir, you and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. I think Warner Brothers too. Now, as many people know, I worked on the Warner Brothers lot for 2 years. My first long-term job in Hollywood was I worked for the senior vice president of physical production at Warner Brothers, Bill Young. And I worked at Warner Brothers actually for a total of 3 years. But to me, the one thing about Warner Brothers is nothing else but a movie studio. Now, Yeah, you could say, what about Warner Brothers cartoons? They still came from a studio. The words together, Warner Brothers, is nothing else but a studio. You hear the title, you hear the word Paramount. I like the word Paramount, of paramount importance. I mean, I obviously, because of Star Trek, I think about Paramount. But Warner Brothers is what exemplifies movies to me. Now, the other thing that is a very, very close second, chomping at its rear, chomping at the rear, would be 20th Century Fox. Now, the thing about 20th Century Fox is 20th century, the idea of the 20th century, since I was born there, the idea of the 20th century has other meanings to me other than just movies. Whereas Warner Brothers, there's nothing else you can mistake that for. Now, you could say Disney is a studio now, but to me, also growing up for most of my life, I considered Disney to be pretty much their animated movies. Now, of course, they always made live action films as well and TV shows, but Disney was its own niche thing. It didn't encompass film history. But I think Warner Brothers, is there a studio that better exemplifies motion picture history? Now, you could say Universal as well, but again, Universal, when I think Universal, I'm so steeped in science fiction, it could be something different. But Universal is also another, but again, it's another great studio. It's been around for a long, long time. And if you think about where Hitchcock wound up, I mean, Paramount and Universal. But to me, for whatever reason, Warner Brothers just says movies. It can't be anything else. King Waspinator is here. Our man King Waspinator. This should be fun. King Waspinator says, only an hour ago till the clock strikes midnight, at least here in Texas. My last hour as a 41-year-old. It's been an incredibly strange and horrible year, and I should get a few things off my chest before I begin my new existence as a 42-year-old. I'm still pissed off at you, Rob. Mayhaps for naught, but I have every right to feel touchy about things. Thoughts of my mom have weighed heavily on me today. She was no saint. She was a lunatic, dangerously crazy at times. For years, I kept an eye on her, trying to drag her back to the shore from going too far out into the deep water. But now that she's gone, I see that she pulled me further and further away from the beach than I pulled her. And now I am adrift, alone with the guilt of not having been there for her when she needed me most. And now she's dead, and I don't know how to forgive myself. She died alone in a bathtub with no one there to help her, and all because I was too stubborn to forgive her. I went through so much stress to keep us from becoming homeless after her mother died, and to get the both of us home to Austin, only for her to immediately run back to Denver so she could stay on methadone. This is heavy, man. I barely spoke a word to her in the 4 years after that. I didn't want to have to explain. I didn't want to feel shame. But a year ago, she went through rehab after breaking her hip, and she got off the methadone and asked me if I wanted her to come down and join me here, and I said no. Oh, I had plenty of good-sounding logical reasons why it would be impractical, but truth be told, I was angry at her for betraying me. I avoided talking to her. I had ignored her last message to me on Facebook for a month, and then got the news from my dad that she had passed away. Only then did I read what she had wrote, asking if she should hire a detective to find me, and mentioning a song by Ween she knew I liked. She was just trying to connect with me again. I wouldn't have even let her buy me a birthday present, and now here we are, a year later, and she's gone. Why does my YouTube channel suck, Rob? Because I want it to. An act of self-sabotage so I can tell myself I'm doing something with all that boundless intelligence and creativity people kept telling me I had when I was younger. I assume they weren't lying, without really having to worry about being discovered. So you did the right thing, Rob, when you didn't want to signal boost me by making a big deal out of my meme supposedly being censored. I don't know about that. I'm a rude son of a bitch, and I say terrible things you don't want me associated with your brand. But that hologram of my mother that I find exists in other memory. Go figure, reading Dune too much gave me that too. She is the part of me that is angry at you, because that ghost of my knowledge of her does not condone my tendency to sabotage my life. She doesn't think I'm best left in the ash pile at the bottom of society. There was a moment there a few weeks back, before I effectively told you to go fuck yourself in so many words, that this is the sort of thing tiny little YouTube channel's dream of happening. The mod for a much bigger and more importantly well-respected channel wanted you to make a stink out of my stupid meme supporting you being mysteriously designated as not safe for work level content. YouTube frickin' loves supporting little guys who get unjustly censored. Just look at all the recent videos about Dr. Disrespect that came out of nowhere because Twitch messed with him. Having you, at that moment in time, make a story out of that would have been a genuine miracle for a channel's growth. The algorithm does not like me. I need signal boosts. But finally something legit happens that could have led to that, entirely unsolicited on my part, I may add, but no. I want to attribute it to you just being nervous about your precious brand in the wake of your sudden cancellation. But I'm no mind reader. All I know is as time marches on, I find myself growing more annoyed by the whole incident rather than feeling like I made a mistake. It's never going to get another good chance like that, and it's poisoned my ability to like your show, which in turn cuts me off from the few people I was starting to get to know, and there's no reversing it. The moment is gone. I made the cardinal mistake of biting the hand of my so-called betters. And so I'm back to just waiting to see what happens if and when the pyramid gets inverted, dining on the ashes of what would never be. Happy fucking birthday, your old pal King Waspinator. Feel free to read this or not. I won't be around to see it either way. Wow. Okay. Well, King Waspinator, you always do write interesting letters. So, first of all, if you're not here, I'll just speak to the tribe. I'll speak to all of you. I don't necessarily know what King Waspinator is referring to about me not sharing a meme he made. But I will say this. I learned about YouTubing from watching other YouTubers and also listening to people like John Campea, who I think John Campea is very good at working in the YouTube space. I think John puts on a great show. John's primary concern when he's putting on his YouTube show, he's really concerned about one thing: the experience the viewer has watching John's show. It really is. You know, whether you like John or you don't like John, I have immense respect for him as an employer and also as somebody. Forget if I work with him or know him or not. I look at somebody like John Campea as somebody that you can learn from if you want to work in the YouTube space. John puts a lot of money back into his show. He's always buying new equipment. He's always working on or getting different software licenses. He's always trying to, John tinkers with the actual sound quality of his show. He has a lot more means than I do in terms of being able to do these kinds of things. So he's constantly trying to make his show better for his viewers. Now, I had no idea, King Waspinator, that by my misfortune, you made a meme that I was supposed to boost the signal for. I didn't know that. And I don't necessarily, look, my whole reason for doing this now, it didn't start out this way, but we have a community of people here that I enjoy. And I hope that this show becomes a positive influence on people's lives. Everyone is welcome here. You know, this is a place where all fans from all sides of whatever political aisle or whatever your beliefs are, you're all welcome here. And I only ask one thing in return. I ask that if you come into this community and if you're part of this community, that you respect the rights of everybody else to be a part of this community as well. That's it. As the Duke of Dope Discourse, hopefully that's why I read your letters, and that's why I want people to come here and have a place where hopefully they can meet one another and converse. But also I try and read things that are either humorous like today or amusing, or people can, make it a place where people can come at least have a good time. That's what we're supposed to do here. Now, I'm very sorry to hear about the situation with your mother and all of those things, but in terms of, I don't think that me giving you a signal boost to your channel, I didn't know that that's what you wanted from me, and maybe you could have contacted me directly. I'm easy to find. You can DM me on Twitter. I leave my DMs open so people can find them, or you can send me an email or find me on Facebook or Instagram or, wherever. I'm very active on social media, so I'm an easy person to find. But look, I think, being on YouTube, like I've told people, the one thing that you have, if you're going to try and enter the YouTube space, and it's changing all the time, is you have to provide something that's unique for people. And what's unique, what all people have is what's unique is themselves. You have your own point of view. And if you want to go on YouTube and start talking and start doing a show, I think you should, just like John Campea. You should. But, if you're going to work in the genre pundit space, there's a lot of people that you're now competing with that have been there for a long time. But if you have something unique to provide, well, you should bring that. You should do that. And by the way, if you expect to make, I don't know, money or have a right away, it's a grind, man. I mean, this is the 456th episode of this show. 456 episodes I've done where I'm sitting in front of a camera talking. Sometimes I wonder if, like, do I sound like an asshole? Am I an idiot? Are people liking this? I don't know. There are times when I've like, maybe I shouldn't just go on today. And then I'll get someone's letter. And, I will have said something that they liked, and it'll make them tell me they went and did something or whatever. And then I'm like, all right, I'll go on. I think that ultimately we all have to be responsible for ourselves. I mean, it's so strange nowadays. We live in a world where, you get caught up in a cause. Like lately we've seen protesting very good causes. Black Lives Matter, I think, is very legitimate. And the way people are protesting, everybody's getting together. But on the other hand, people are also using this time as there's definitely a bully pulpit being created, where if you don't think exactly the way I think, then I'm going after you. I only want people who think exactly the same as me to be around, and I think that's dangerous. I mean, I think that the greatness, as I've said before on this show, the greatest resource that exists on this planet is each one of us. I mean, animals too, but animals aren't necessarily self-aware, and they can't talk to you. They can't tell you what they're thinking. They can convey their feelings though. But I think human beings, there's only one of each of us, and I think that alone is worthy of respect, and that alone is worthy of wanting to preserve the rights of the individual, because each one of us are so different. They're so different, and I think that ultimately our baseline should be that we should respect everyone. And a lot of what we're talking about here, Black Lives Matter, trans rights, all of those things ultimately come down to, why don't just we respect the individual? Because every single person that exists on this planet, in all of their shape, size, colors, and creeds, there's only one of them. There's only one of each one of us. And, I go back to the great speech that Dr. McCoy gives to Kirk in Balance of Terror, which is a terrific first season Star Trek episode. If you've never seen the original series, if you want to watch one episode, Balance of Terror is a good place to start. You'll come to grips with knowing who the people are through pop culture. You'll get it. But Dr. McCoy talks about the entire infinitude of the universe. And in all of that, and perhaps more, there's only one of each of us. And all of these things, all anybody wants is they want to be respected as an individual and as a human being. And they don't want to be denigrated. They want the same opportunities as all their other human beings. And they should get them. They should get them. But human beings are complex. We're very interesting. And even though there's only one of us, we tend to buy off on ideologies because we want to be part of a group. And I think ultimately I am a big fan of the individual. But the individual must take responsibility for themselves. They must, if you want to go on YouTube, you've got to do the work. Like everything else, you've got to put in the work. If you're going to belong to a group and everybody wants to now give you a chance, great. But at the end of the day, your group is not going to help you as an individual excel at whatever it is you want to do. It always comes down to yourself. And that's all I can say. And I didn't realize that you were angry with me because I didn't give your signal a boost when you came up with. I didn't understand that. I retweet a lot of stuff, but I haven't been in a position where I'm retweeting a lot of other. There was a lot of people who did shows about me. They were very flattering. people came out and were very nice. But I didn't really retweet those kinds of things because I felt that would be self-serving. And I figured, you know what? Only I can address the situation that I'm in. And I think that's the way it should be. If you want to let other people talk about it, I think that's great. But I didn't realize that you expected or wanted a signal boost from me. And I think it's too bad I didn't realize that you weren't watching the show anymore. But anyway, as I said, anybody can write these letters into me and say what they want. And I will be respectful of your that you did it. I absolutely will. Calvin Bose is here. Hello, Calvin. Dear Rob, this cancel culture has really gotten bad. A couple of weeks ago, our drive-in announced that they soon would be playing a John Wayne double feature of McClintock and True Grit. That's a pretty good double feature, actually. My boys and I were excited as we were going to get to see the Duke as he should be seen on the big screen. Then we came back this week, and I asked the owner when they were planning to show the double feature, and he told me they were not going to be able to. He told me that after the announcement, he got bombarded with calls calling him a racist for daring to screen John Wayne movies. One call even threatened to burn down the drive-in. He said he couldn't take the risk. This whole thing all stems from an interview he did in 1971 for Playboy. They're even removing his name and statue from the John Wayne Airport. Why this also makes me angry is that was John Wayne was the first famous person I met. So let me tell you about my meeting with him. I was 7 years old living in Phoenix. My mom and her brother and I were having lunch at a local steakhouse, and in walks John Wayne with a couple of extra guys. I didn't know who they were, but I recognized him because I saw him in a lot of westerns, and I asked my mom for paper and pen to get his autograph. I went to his table and said, "Mr. Wayne, can I have your autograph?" He said, "Sure you can, little buck, but don't call me Mr. Wayne, call me Duke." He shook my hand, and I remember his hand was so big it swallowed my hand. He asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I told him a lawyer. And he said he may need my services someday. Then, as I was walking away, he told the waitress to give him our tab. Yes, John Wayne paid for our lunch. In him, I saw a man who cared about his fans, and that was cool. After that, I saw every John Wayne movie in theaters or on TV when they came on. Now, after all this time, we have people protesting the showing of his films. Yes, the man had controversial views, but he was such a racist. Why do minorities who work with him speak highly of him? George Takei said that when filming the Green Berets, he told him how he was honored to make a film with him, but he disagreed with the Vietnam War, and John Wayne told him he respected his opinion, but he hired him for his talent, not his political beliefs. Also, the Native Americans who work with him in Monument Valley all remember him fondly. The idiots who protested the showing of his films do not even know these things, and I'll bet they didn't even read the Playboy interview, they just heard stuff out of context. I myself would probably be labeled a racist for the fact that I'm a fan of his, but a child cannot meet this man and be treated as I was without creating a lifelong love for the guy. Whenever I see one of his movies, I am that 7-year-old boy again. Well, Calvin, I think you sort of nailed it on the head. I mean, what's really interesting to me is John Wayne was an actor. Not that he wasn't a nice guy in real life, but his job was to pretend he was, whether it was Genghis Khan, which he played, or, the Duke, whether he was in True Grit, fill your hands, you son of a bitch, whether he was in My Darling Clementine or whatever the hell he was in. Wait a minute. Was he in My Darling Clementine? No, I might be wrong about that. What I'm thinking of, I'm not thinking about My Darling Clementine. That's wrong. I'm thinking about, the Irish, anyway, Stagecoach, The Searchers, whatever. Whatever your movie of choice is that you like. He's an actor, but he came to symbolize America.